We are Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Max Barr of Southeastern 14 here to preview SEC basketball action for Wednesday night. We've got 3 games: Tennessee visiting Mississippi State, Florida traveling to Oxford to face Ole Miss, Arkansas looking for a rebound after a disastrous performance going to Georgia, which just went on the road. We'll break all 3 of those down momentarily in order of tip-off, but a reminder, this preview brought to you by BetOnline. With NFL playoffs right around the corner and the NBA season in full swing, BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-second odds, news, and scores. With additional odds, lines, trends, and info on both mobile and desktop, you can access the world's best wagering information at any time. Head there today to get in on the action, see all the updated odds. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, following Tennessee on the SEC Network at 8 Central, Ole Miss, coming off its first loss, which was, of course, at Tennessee, comes home to face the Florida Gators, who also come off a loss, that one in Gainesville to Kentucky in a game where both teams played well. Florida, despite being on the road, is about a 1.5-point favorite with a 55% chance to win, according to the computers. Now, as we've noted all year, the computers have not fully factored in the availability of a couple of players for Ole Miss. Certainly give weight to that first month where the Rebels were winning games, but not winning games by any significant margin in a lot of cases against bad teams. Maybe that carries some weight because it seemed to do that in Knoxville. But I'm fascinated by this one. Florida kind of in a spot here, Max, where the Gators look good, but there's a little bit of a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. And Ole Miss coming off a terrible performance with top 5, top 10 head coach to get them motivated and ready for this. That's a scary spot if you're the Gators.
Yeah, this one is really hard to break down because like you mentioned, both teams have analytical numbers that don't really represent who they truly are. You have Florida, who didn't have, Pullen has been one of the best ball handlers in the conference since he's come along, and he wasn't there in the beginning, and then Hanloked, and then you obviously know the transfer stuff that's been approved with Ole Miss. So both teams, it's hard to look at the numbers and put that much weight into them. But this is a tough one because it's both teams with their back against the wall, both need a win. And so they're both going to come out scrapping. And when it's a game like that where it's going to be physical and how hard these teams are going to be playing, I like to look at the stuff you can control, right? Like taking care of the ball and rebounding, because shots might not fall in conference play. It just, you're going to be up for the game. Emotions are high. You never know how you're going to shoot. Look at Kentucky, Florida. Florida makes 8 threes in one half, one the other. It's just like you're going to have to rely on stuff you can control. And I give the edge here to Florida, even on the road. Those rebounding numbers against Tennessee for Ole Miss are really concerning. And if there's one thing Florida does well, everyone knows it's hit the glass, especially the offensive glass. And so Ole Miss is going to have to rebound exponentially better than they did against Tennessee if they want a chance in this one. What are you seeing here, Blake?
That is the most glaring advantage, I think, for either side is Florida's ability to grab maybe 20 offensive rebounds in this game or something. But I don't know. Like, this was one of those games where, look, I voted Florida in the top 5 in power rankings this week, and they finished at 5, I think, in our power rankings. I feel that good about Florida, but this is one of those games where I just don't know. Like, I feel like there's something to the effect of, I said this to someone yesterday, like, Ole Miss getting a Tennessee game first on the conference slate, I think, was the perfect scenario for them, because you immediately go from, you go into having to play the toughest team in terms of, like, I think the toughest team to prepare for is Tennessee. And you immediately have to play that game right out of the gate. And that sort of sets Chris Beard up with a great formula to say, okay, like, everybody was talking you up. You were 13-0. And you guys thought you were the best team in the world. well, this is what it takes to be, right here. You just saw what it takes to get there. And I almost feel like that could work in Ole Miss's favor here, in that they come home and play a Florida team. Let's call it what it is. I know Ole Miss is deflated how they play against Tennessee, but Florida's pretty deflated too, because they felt like they should have won that game against Kentucky. And like you said, I don't know that Florida's going to come out here and have a half the way that they had in the first half in that game. So there's a reason this one, I think, whatever the betting numbers will be or whatever, is going to be close. But you're talking about kind of a clash of styles here too. And I don't know. I mean, Florida's not been great at taking care of the ball. They don't shoot the ball well. Free throw wise, they don't shoot it well. And so you get in a close game. I worry about that. They shoot 65% from the line. So this is one where it feels like a toss up here, and I haven't made my decision yet on who I'm going to pick. I'm going to filibuster a little bit more, but I think this is an interesting spot for both teams. And so, we'll see how everybody picks this one.
Chris, what did you have the predicted spread at?
It was 1.5 Florida with a 55% chance of victory. And again, that factors in the whole season. I'm going to throw things out. I'll start us off with making my pick, and maybe some things I say influence you one way or the other. But let's go back to when Ole Miss started playing well. It was that game where it blew out NC State at home on November the 28th. It was a 20-point blowout. To that point, they didn't have Brandon Murray or Musa Cisse. Obviously, better team with both those guys. And I don't think they had those guys against Memphis either. Oh, they had Cisse. Okay. So had one of the two, beat a Memphis team that at that time was playing about as well as anybody in the country, beat them 80-77. Since then, the home games have been more along the lines of blowouts against bad teams, which Ole Miss wasn't even doing earlier. Beat Troy by 21 at home, beat Bryant by, 17? I don't know how much you extrapolate from that, but here's what I'm getting at. I think Blake touched on it earlier. You got a coach who's got a team motivated, and yes, you can say the same thing for Florida, but I think Ole Miss fans are going to be fired up. I think they're going to be in the building. I think they're going to be loud. And in a game that computers have as a near toss-up, give me that atmosphere and give me Chris Beard angry and getting a team ready, and that is why I'm going to take Ole Miss.
Okay, interesting. The main thing that I'm going back and forth with, because Blake, you just mentioned it, is Florida going to make 8 threes in the first half again? Probably not. That's what kind of the average full game. Are they going to have that crazy atmosphere behind them? No. But those rebounding numbers are just so jarring to me that I really am concerned for Ole Miss. And you got to think that's exactly what Chris Beard is going to challenge his team, this week in practice, everything. The number one area of concern is rebounding. And so, I mean, you have a few guys that can rebound. Flanagan's a good guard rebounder. Breakfield's not bad at all. You got to get more out of those big guys. So I'll be interested to see how they respond. I've been the biggest Ole Miss guy this whole time. I know I have. And I'm going to try to enact an old Blake Lovell jinx curse here. And I'm going to take the Gators on the road. But you just have to understand what I'm doing with the mental game there. There's a lot going into this.
The Florida Gators have won 7 straight against Ole Miss in Gainesville. The Florida Gators have lost 4 of their last 5 in Oxford.
Don't tell me that.
3 straight. And boy, have they had some poor performances in Oxford. 70-54 in 2022, 68-51 in 2020. And keep in mind, like, Ole Miss has struggled in some of these years, right? Like these haven't exactly been Ole Miss teams during those years that were competing for an SEC title. So it's just something to think about. Ole Miss went 13-19 in 2022, beat Florida by 16 at home. Florida won 20 games that year. So 2020, I think you kind of throw out maybe, but Ole Miss 15-17 in 2020, beat Florida by 17 at home. Florida won 19 games that year. So, again, I like leaning on my trends here. Yeah, so they've not played well in Oxford, and I'm going to go back to what I just said a minute ago when we started this conversation. I just think someone is getting upset. And again, with a lot of these games, I don't know how much you could say like these are huge upsets. Although Mississippi State beating Tennessee, a top 5 team, maybe. But I just feel like an underdog is going to win somewhere. And let me just go ahead and spoil it for you. I'm not picking the underdog in the next game. So I feel like I have to pick one somewhere. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss here, even as a slight underdog, even though I think Florida's the better team. But guess what? If we just pick based on our power rankings every week, it'd make no sense because this is the SEC, and we all would have picked Texas A&M to beat LSU. That didn't happen. We all would have picked, and so forth, right? So just the way it works. This could be very simple. Florida come out and grab 20 offensive rebounds and win this game by 15, just on that alone. But I tend to think Ole Miss is going to turn this into a bit of a grind, which we know Florida gets up and down the floor. Ole Miss does too offensively at times, but I just think this is one where I'll take a shot and pick Ole Miss here.
I am burning inside right now. Burning.
Yeah, what about, man? Come on, all of us pick Ole Miss, and you're over here picking the Gators.
Because if I pick Ole Miss, it's a guaranteed win for Florida.
That's
so
true.
I'm doing all you Rebel fans a favor here.
That's true.
He watched too much of you and Dennis Gates last year. That's what's happened here. He's figured this out, Blake.
There's a system.
He's on to you.
You gotta have a system, or else where do you get in life? So now this should be a good game. Like this, this should be a really good game. So,
hey, in all seriousness, I keep these, and they're just mostly for my internal trying to sort things through it. This basically it's a top 75 or 80 in college basketball of points above average. It's just based on mainstream computers, and I've made some common sense tweaks for tempo, and there just isn't that much difference between some of these teams. Nationally at the top, you've got Arizona, Houston, Purdue, which are about 3.5 points better than everybody else on the field. But then you get to Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, or your next three all right there together. But to these ones, you've got Florida about 12.3 points above average, and Ole Miss, and again, an Ole Miss team that is not, I think, reflected accurately in computers because of those absences of Cisse and Murray, 7.4 points. That's on a neutral floor. You throw in the home court advantage, which can be anywhere between almost nothing to maybe 6 points. I've heard people say. So, you've give Ole Miss 5 or 6 points and you've virtually evened it. We're going to see a lot of that this year. And keep in mind, we saw carnage on home courts all weekend. So I just think if that's any indication, it's going to be a phenomenal year. But anyway, sorry for the sidebar. Let's get us to the last game, unless you had something there, Blake.
Florida's 9 of 52 from 3 in their last 2 trips to Oxford.
Ooh.
So I think this is a better shooting team, but 9 of 52 from 3 in their last 2 trips there. So we'll see if the historical trends hold here. So
yeah. So 2 of us are taking Ole Miss.
And then one of us is doing Ole Miss a favor.
Right.